This is our first of a series with our new Health and Wellness Subcommittee through the Committee on the Environment. And first of all, we just wanted to start off today by taking a moment to recognize the fact that it is MLK Day. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15th, 1929, and dedicated his life to challenging the oppression of Black people in the U.S. And this holiday is known as a day of action rather than simply a day off to recognize the work of the civil rights leader. Obviously, this is very relevant, especially this year. And, you know, his leadership paved the way for great progress, but obviously we have a lot more work to do. And as Martin Luther King said it himself, the time is always right to do what is right.
Wow,
So I want you all to make it one of your personal goals this year to get more engaged in the conversations related to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Stay up to date on what NOMA is doing and JEDI through AIA. Stay tuned for their sessions throughout the year related to these topics. So we ask all of you to be change agents. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers today. We have Kristof, Irwin, and Lauren Stanley. Kristof and Lauren will be leading our newly formed subcommittee, a health and wellness subcommittee. Let me get your bios open.
Are you sharing a screen?
No, if you want to pull up your screen, I was just going to introduce, read your bios if I can find them.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, sorry. So Kristof is a principal of Positive Energy. In that role, he works to rethink the way society delivers conditioned space to itself and recognizes the potential of homes and buildings to impact human and planetary thriving. Kristof's background includes 12 years of experience as a custom builder, including deep energy retrofits and zero net energy projects, and 11 years as a building science consultant. He worked for 14 years as an engineer, research scientist, and physicist for government and university research labs. He's active in the local and national high-performance building community, including his role as past chair of AIA Austin's Building Enclosure Committee, advisor to our committee, COTE, as well as several ASHRAE committees.
Oh, I need to update that. Thank you, Kendall.
And then we have Lauren Stanley. Lauren is an architect and co-owner of Stanley Studio, an integrated design practice she shares with Lars Stanley, FAIA. Their studio and shop produce architectural and metalwork projects at a wide range of scales, from schools and libraries to parks and public art, integrating crafted detail, sustainable systems, and response to the natural world. Drawn to the intersection of architecture and landscape, Lauren seeks design solutions that are rooted to their site, engaged with their culture, responsible with resources, and offer a little gesture and poetry.
Yay.
All right.
Okay.
Take it off.
So we're gonna, let's see. Thank you all for coming. This is a really important topic. This is a very busy time. There's lots of things to pay attention to. And I think it's pretty clear that Lauren and I both feel that societally speaking, we're so ready to be done with COVID. However, that's not the reality we're currently living through. In fact, we are living through one of the highest rates of community spread that we've seen in Austin. So this is kind of like a time to just remind you to double down on being safe. You know, it's great that people are getting vaccines instead of, we're hearing about friends that are getting vaccines instead of friends that are getting COVID. So that's a big deal. As far as the choreography today, it's going to be mostly me, I think, with Lauren chiming in from time to time. So Lauren, you just make sure you chime in. So without further ado, I want to get through these sessions. They're pretty quick. They should be fun, hopefully, and hopefully they'll stick. And then we can have a Q&A. So here we are, AIA. I would like to thank the leadership for being willing to have this, and the AIA Austin. Rob, thank you so much for all you did to help set this up. I, of course, would like to figure out how to go to the next slide. Okay, there we go. I hit the arrow and somehow it didn't like the arrow. So we wouldn't be here except for our sponsors. We're really grateful to Indoor Weather Pros and Pilgrim. It's just a very important time to remember that what we do makes a difference, including what we sponsor with our time and our dollars. So thank you, Indoor Weather Pros, if you're here, and thank you, Pilgrim, if you're here. So I'm going to skip this, but Positive Energy does a lot of things. We're really trying to center in on this convergence of architecture and engineering. I don't feel good about doing a commercial. You guys know us. If you don't, please get to know us. If you don't know, Miguel works for Positive Energy as well. If there's anyone here that doesn't know that. This is one of the quotes I loved from MLK. Only in the darkness can you see the stars. And, like as Kendall mentioned, holy moly, what a year, right? A global pandemic, we had wildfires. We are experiencing a fraying social fabric. I think for a lot of us, we're experiencing something like our culture at a crossroads, right? And so the message is clear. We can see the stars. We know with COVID that individual actions do matter at the macro scale. It really is up to us, right? This is not a pep talk. This is a fact, right? There are no others than us, caring people in our society, working toward known objectives, and working within our individual ranges of effectiveness. That was for you, Travis, a little martial arts reference there. Keep your center and work within your range of effectiveness. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about COVID risk assessment, but first we're going to have a little prelude and just talk about this little critter right here. Holy moly, who would have thought that this tiny little thing could impact global society and the global economy the way it is? So let's talk about it. How much smaller do you think it is than us? Anyone guess? Way smaller, like way, way, way smaller. So I'll just tell you, it's about 100 nanometers. I mean, it's actually riding in a little capsule. The inside there is actually the RNA, which is the problem. And it is about 10 million times smaller than us. It is actually like 17 million, but that's on the order of 10 million times smaller than us. So holy moly. So now then, what is it that we are around 10 million times smaller than? It's our whole planet. It's not West Texas. It's not the Pacific Ocean. It is our whole planet. So sometimes math and poetry converge, and I feel like that's what we're seeing here. So the idea that, very small things like people can't affect things at a planetary scale, it's simply not a fact. It's simply not true. It's wishful thinking. Okay, so this is the little dude, right? It's got all these proteins how it connects to us, but really it's that RNA virus inside. It rides around in this little encapsulated vehicle of itself. And so 10 million times smaller, but powerful effect. And just to kind of give us a reference for smaller, right? That's the Burj Khalifa, right? That is the world's tallest building. It's been around since 2010. We are only 500 times smaller than that building that reaches, through the clouds, right? So when we say 10 million, it's almost like impossible to understand. So it's very small, but it uses a vehicle to get to us, COVID does, which is the air. And might seem counterintuitive, but this is something I want to start giving you a perspective on air. This is a pint of water. Water is a incompressible fluid. If it was empty, it would be filled with air and it would be a compressible fluid. And at the core of the perspective to keep you safe during COVID is to remember that you are constantly drinking pints of air, constantly, a half a liter, 12 to 16 times a minute, right? So that adds up to be a lot of air, 24/7, 365, 30 to 40 pounds a day. It's 10 times the amount of food we take in. So COVID virions getting stuck on dust, they don't ride around in those spacecraft. Those spacecraft dock on asteroids that we call dust. And they end up going down into our lungs, right? So the interesting thing is when we take air into our body, it becomes us, right? It diffuses into our blood, and our blood diffuses out into our exhalation. So the interesting thing is that all the time you are taking that which you are immersed in, which is air, and you are making it you. I don't think anyone here would say, oh, my blood, that's not part of me, right? The gases in my blood, the particles, the living beings I've diffused into my blood. So that is the case. That is the real world. And our lungs, if you unroll all those little bags, the alveolar sacs, they're called, if you make them flat, flatten them out, tennis court. Each one of you is carrying around a tennis court, hopefully a nice, pink, lovely, surfaced tennis court of lung tissue inside you. You need to be breathing. So these are the two big themes, right, in our society right now when it comes to this air that we're breathing. Ours is a microbial world, and we are, in fact, the guinea pigs. We, especially here in the United States, we are our own guinea pigs. So we somehow think that's okay. So when we say ours is a microbial world, there's kind of like a split here. And one side of the split is this thing that I call me. A biologist would say, oh yeah, Kristof, you're actually a microbial symbiote, right? In terms of DNA, there's more microbial DNA right here than human DNA, right? Like what's digesting your lunch right now, right? Is it human DNA based beings eating your food? No, right? We know this. We know that we're microbial symbiotes, and we live our lives immersed in a sea of air, right? In that sea of air are millions or trillions, it's not out of the question to say that, of living beings, as well as chemicals, as well as particles from our ourselves, our pets. So it's a very dynamic, interactive relationship. And the good news is that we have a filtration mechanism. There's our nose, there's our whole sinuses. They're coated with fluid, keeping it friendlier, and then hairs. And so there's this natural defense against big particles. And then there's these finer particles, the PM 2.5. This is what, ozone action days are about. And then not in this talk, but this ultrafine particle, a COVID particle is right at the end, right at that 0.1 micron, 100 nanometers, 0.1 microns, same thing. That's right where they live. But this, you're kind of, my prediction, Nostradamus here, is that we think we're hearing about PM 2.5 a lot. In the coming years, we're going to be hearing about ultrafines, nanoparticles, because these have these three words associated with them. These particles, you breathe them in and they go direct to blood, meaning they're just so far past our body's filtration system. So that's a big deal. Little bit of math here. I tried to keep this really quick, but look at the number 1. You see the 1 on the top there? That's 1 micron. That is the particle size of interest for the COVID virion. That is the particle size that it attaches to that gets into us. That is the dominant mode of transmission, is particles of that size. If you go 1 to the left, the 0.1, that's how big the COVID virion itself is. You go 1 to the right, 10 microns, that's conventional dust and dirt and bigger. So now go to the bottom of this chart, very important here. You see the red line, handled by the body's natural filter? It starts to fail around 0.1, right? So we really start to rely on external filters, right? And it's absolutely legitimate and important for architects to think of the building that they're putting their clients in as something like a pre-lung. This is air that's been preconditioned so that the next step is it engages with the human lung without detrimental impacts, right? So then on the left side, the red, the most negative health effects, they're occurring in these particle sizes that you can't see. So if I just briefly go back 2 slides, you see all that dust in the air? None of that dust is what you need to worry about. You can see it. Your body's got that covered. It's all the stuff you can't see, can't smell, can't detect, but is real. So what we have going on with COVID is we have, unfortunately, we're kind of stuck in the late 1890s with the medical industry, where they still are saying their first reaction is, oh, SARS, that's like SARS-1. It's dominated by fomite transmission. Therefore, watch out shaking people's hand, kissing people, or accidentally, sneezing, coughing, spitting, getting large droplets. It's the squirt gun model, right? So that is what the public health institutions told us about right away. Many air quality people were like, excuse me, that's nuts. And we were talking about droplet nuclei. So think of vaping, right? So if you look at the bottom of the screen, the whole 2-meter distancing is generally about squirt gun model, right? The whole wear a mask is about airborne transmission, aerosols, with the exception that I am standing in this room and I am like a candle and there is a plume, right? I'm hotter than the air. So there's this plume around me and that plume takes the air around me and sucks it up. So staying 2 meters away is actually good for both, which is a beautiful kind of synergy. So many air quality scientists came together and developed a COVID-19 transmission tool based on something called Wells-Riley. And this is Jose Jimenez, University of California, Boulder. He developed that spreadsheet. That's a small piece of it. It's quite accessible and quite technical. I mean, it would take you 2 full days to read all the articles in the README and all the facts. But that's what we did. So on the left here, you're seeing a very grainy picture of William Wells from the 1930s. He was the guy that among his achievements was basically helped us get rid of measles and TB. The guy on the bottom below him on the left, that's Mr. Riley. I'm blanking on his name, Richard Riley, I think. Interesting. William Wells, Richard Riley. And so Jose Jimenez took his work and extended it forward. But you can see there, right? So Shelley Miller and Lindsay Marr and Rich Corsi, who used to be at UT. All these air quality scientists have just been effusive with their time and their knowledge. I have the great good fortune of being in touch with a lot of these people. This is the model. So basically that little gingerbread man there that says infective, he's emitting at a rate of E, and so, most of it goes into the air. So the concentration is X. Some of it is getting deposited. We would love it to be deposited on filters where it is stuck. Some of it is dying, that's the L. Some of it just dies in the air. Those viral capsules dry out. But the big one there is that, you know, the room is a box, right? So for all our aesthetic intentions, homes are boxes and we put people in them. We should make the air clean and healthy. We have outdoor air flowing in, we have indoor air flowing out. That happens intentionally and unintentionally. So intentionally, right, ERVs in homes, dedicated outdoor air systems in mechanical systems. Filtration, this is the filter curve, right? So this is the pre-lung of the home, is a filter in some ways. You want to filter it. And I want you to notice a couple things. Look at the 1 on the right. You see where 1 is? Like, do you guys see a mouse when I do this? You don't, do you? Anyway, just, oh, you do. Okay, so if you look at the 1, you can see up here, MERV 16, it's basically 100%. MERV 14, very close, like 95%. But look at MERV 13 at 1. You know, it's not that great. It's around 80, 90%. But the big thing is that every filter has this natural, what they call the MPPS, most penetrating particle size. A little bit of physics here, but it's always around 0.2, 0.3. So that's where filters are rated. So when I just want you to look at the brown MERV 13 curve. When ASHRAE says minimum filtration recommendation is MERV 13 for all buildings all the time, that is not some elite highbrow filter recommendation. That is like, look, we're trying to be reasonable. We understand that. I was at a meeting where someone had just approved an RFP for a school to go to MERV 4. MERV 6 is the lowest on here, right? MERV 4 is like almost literally useless to put that in, but it was VE'd into this school. I also got into a little heated exchange at the Home Depot with a guy like buying a bunch of MERV 8s. And I'm like, what are those for? He goes, oh, those are for the preschool down the street. This is HEPA. So this is HEPA. It has that same MPPS at 0.2. Look at the left-hand scale, right? That is not 100, 90, 80, 70. That's 100 and the bottom is 99.4. So what makes HEPA is that at 0.3, it's at least 99.7 effective, right? And I just want to caveat that, sorry, ASHRAE people, if you're listening, the ASHRAE standards are out of date. They're kind of hijacked by manufacturers somewhat, and we really need to be going to the European and international standards organizations. They're much clearer, and HEPA, you can go way beyond HEPA. Okay, so back to this, right? PM10, standard filters are fine with PM10. MERV 13 is certainly fine. PM 2.5, again, MERV 13 is fine, but if you want to deal with the really small stuff, HEPA. And what we're dealing with COVID virion is not the virion itself, the dust it's attached to it, 1 micron. We don't know if it's a half a micron or 2 microns. We recognize it's centered around this range. And so what we're saying is MERV 13, literally minimum, because it doesn't really catch much on the small side, but it does better and better on the big side. So to the extent we can get HEPA, which is pretty simple to do, that box on the left, $200. I got one in my daughter's bedroom, got one in my bedroom. Very, very worthwhile. The one on the right's an $800 model. You can run it on low speed. It still gives high volumes. It's quiet. Frankly, I would buy 4 COEs over the IQ Air. That was a bit bold. Okay, so now masks. You're going to see in the report coming up, we're about to get quantitative with COVID risk transmission here, that, oh my gosh, masks are not masks, right? So masks that are made out of what's called electret material. This is material that uses electrostatic attraction to take that MPPS, that dip in the filter curve, and bring it up. It uses material properties. They have scienced the crap out of it, right? So that is what we want to be breathing through. 80-80 is really conservative. The 95 in N95 is 95% effective at 0.18 microns, right? So these N95s, KN95s, KF94s, these electret materials. Here's a KF94. This is the one that's really good for people like me that wear reading glasses, because it has a seam here. It has large air volume, and it doesn't steam up my glasses as much. One last thing about large volume masks. Just imagine this, right? A pint, half a liter, every inhale, every exhale. If I ask that pint to go through a small surface area in each breath, it's going to go fast. If I ask it to go through a larger surface area, it's going to go slower. So to the extent, like that big bird beak on the KN94, it doesn't look great. It's more surface area for a fixed volume of air to flow across. That means the air moves slower. That means it traps better. Plus it's electret, right? Typical cloth mask, 50% on the exhale, 30% on the inhale, right? So please, like, it's so simple. This is around $3, right? It's disposable, but I can use it 4 or 5 times. I can actually let it sit outside in the sun and reuse it several times, right? So there's a lot to say about it. Do not wash this. Do not get this around oils. Do not get this around alcohol. Do not spritz this with alcohol to clean it. It will destroy the electret effect. All right, so that's us, the convergence of architecture and engineering. And now I'm going to share a different screen, and I'm going to do first, I'm going to do a little panic, figure out how to end my slideshow. All right, I think we're good again now. So present, just coming at you in a minute here. So share screen, este, si bueno. Okay, so now do you see, let's talk about COVID risk again. Someone say yes. Whew. This is like the presenter's worst nightmare. Okay, so this one we're going to go through very quickly. This is a report that we've been delivering to several schools and other venues, offices around the city recently, actually not just in Austin. So that is the 1918 pandemic. That is an outdoor classroom. You know, human society in North America, in the US, has dealt with pandemics in the past. Uh-oh, how do I make it go forward? Oh, hold on. Where is this? I thought I had it licked. Okay, good. I can hit the arrow up here. Okay, so part 1 is airborne transmission best practices. There's these 3 avenues. You know, I hope this is review, but there's the fomite, the transmission, the squirt gun model. Excuse me. There's the fomite transmission, direct contact. Then there's the squirt gun model, and then there's the airborne transmission. And then there's the oral fecal route, which is largely being proven to be not a big deal. By the way, if you guys don't know, the fomite route is largely proven to be not a big deal, right? I'm still wiping off my groceries, but like less anxiously. It's very unlikely, unless you have cold produce, cold ice cream, something that's cold where the virions will stay alive longer. Yeah, it's rarely fomite, and it's rarely oral fecal. It's mostly airborne, and a little bit of the squirt gun model in there, which is large droplet transmissions, which is the 2 meters. So this is the core message here, right? You want to use a multi-layered risk reduction strategy. right? So you want to layer your risk reductions. Think, you know, this Swiss cheese thing, this is an image that's too good not to steal, so thank you. So you want everyone to be wearing masks whenever they're indoors. Keep in mind, when you are indoors, there is this term called rebreathe fraction. That means you are rebreathing a fraction of someone else's exhale all the time. And so even when you're wearing a mask, you're doing that, but you're filtering out the particles. So when you're indoors with another person, unless they are in your pod, you are rebreathing their air. That is a fact, right? There is no, oh, I'm 2 meters away, so I'm not rebreathing your air. Airborne particles. So aerosol, let's talk about that. Aerosol, it's an airborne solution. Solution is like salt water. The salt doesn't precipitate out. It stays in solution. So these particles are so small that they can stay in the air, definitely minutes, hours, weeks, months, some of them indefinitely, right? So when you say aerosol, you do not say, oh, Lauren sneezed, but in 10 minutes it'll be fine. No, it's in the air indefinitely. So we want to wear masks, social distance, increase the ventilation, increase the filtration, ideally at a good level at HEPA. It's not hard to do. And then we want to limit our exposures to people. All these things work. So this is a little bit of math. It's inhaled dose on the left. It's not really equals to, it should be proportional to how much concentration of pathogen is in the air you're breathing, how fast are you breathing it, and how long have you been in the space. So if you take each of those, what is the pathogen concentration? Pathogen, by the way, just means it's a living being that causes a negative health outcome. So you want to stay away from people who are sick, right? Who have the disease, who are spreading that pathogen. This is where testing comes in. That is off the scope of this talk, but we could talk about it. This is universal mask wearing whenever you're indoors, unless it's your pod, unless you're at home. This is adding ventilation, right? You dilute the pathogen concentration. So I'm breathing the same amount, but it's diluted in terms of the pathogen. Added filtration. I'm capturing the pathogen on a filter. Therefore, I've diluted the amount, right? That is a huge point. That supplemental filtration, that could be recirculation filtration at your homes and offices, or it could be those portable air cleaners. Supplemental filtration functions with COVID to the same extent in terms of reducing risk as ventilation. That is huge because why? It is way cheaper and easier to supplement filtration or to increase the level of effectiveness of filtration than it is to take an existing school or home and say, let's get you a ventilation system. Now then, any of you on this call that are influencing the design of buildings in any way or advocating to clients in any way, let's remember this moment and say, you know, the fact that we don't deal with ventilation, we hope it goes away as an issue, it seems like, it's completely pathological. It's just nuts. So all that's pathogen concentration. Breathing rate, this is an interesting one for schools, right? Don't let the kids run through the classrooms. Make them move moderately through the building. If I talk to you like this versus if I talk to you like this, I probably just went up like 4 or 5 X on the amount of pathogen I emit or the amount of air I'm emitting. So the volume is proportional to the emission. So if you're indoors with somebody, even masked, right? Because a mask is reducing it, it's not preventing it. Talk quietly. Don't get excited, right? Stay calm indoors. If you have to work with others in an office setting, remember that your breathing is a big influence. And then reduction strategies with filtration and ventilation in place. Remember, like you walk into the room, it's clean, and now I start emitting. Now we all start emitting, and the pathogen concentration will go up over time, right? So at a certain point, leave the room, let the filters and the ventilation system decrease the pathogen concentration. It's about, like, ideally it would be 40 minutes in, 20 minutes out. You could do 30 minutes in, 10 minutes out. But you do want to have like break periods, right? So this applies to you if you're being asked to office, right? I just got off a call late the week before last. Architecture firm in Dallas, they're spending lots of money putting up partitions between cubicles. They're extending the cubicle height 2 feet with clear plexiglass, right? Worthless, right? Worthless for the airborne transmission route. What a shame. What a shame. All right, so masks. We're going to get through these, and the quantitative data is coming up. So look at the bandana. The holes in a bandana are massive relative to even the dust that COVID rides on, right? Even this 1 micron. So the dust, the pore size or the gap between fabrics in a bandana is around 15 microns, right? So 15 times bigger. So like almost literally worthless. Neck gaiters, same thing, right? Cloth masks, around 50% effective, and that's on exhalation, right? So inhalation is a little worse. Look at the N95s, right? So it's like, boom, obviously that's a huge, huge lever that we all need to be levering, pulling. So here's on the lower right, you can see the KF94, the thing I was just showing you, helps prevent the glasses from steaming up. But on the bottom left there, it's really those ones made out of electret material that give you that large volume, that large surface area. I don't know if you can see the inside of this. That is a large surface area, right? When I put this thing on, it's also incredibly comfortable. Like I am, thanks to Miguel, I'm a KF94 lover. And I can share the slide so you can read some of the other words on here. We've already talked about portable HEPA. Huge, do it. Of course, do it, right? You can go buy yourself a box fan. You can tape on the draw side of it. You can tape a HEPA filter from, well, it's hard to get HEPA these days. You can get a nice MERV 13 filter, right? Now you've spent like $50, very effective, not quite as visually elegant, but very effective, right? I don't cover it anywhere else in here, but this is very important. Don't do indoor chemistry in occupied spaces. I know you're hearing that, so repeat after me. I don't need to hear it. Don't need to unmute. Don't do indoor chemistry in occupied spaces. There has been zero net positive effect from these devices. This is your plasma devices, your photocatalytic oxidation, all the positive, negative, bipolar ionization devices. Sure, they can break up this molecule floating through, but what do they do with these two molecules? They combine them and make negative air chemistry. So there is a lot of, you guys know me, I'm pretty outspoken sometimes. There's a lot of really unconscionable predatory practices occurring right now, people selling active air purification technologies. The only one that could be done would be UVGI. It's been, in fact, that was what Mr. Wells invented in the 30s, ultraviolet germicidal radiation, UVC, certain wavelength. It's been proven for decades. It's the only one that works. It's also very expensive, and it should never be done until everything else, good enclosure, reduce the emissions, right, has been done. Make sure you're ventilating properly. Okay, so time in the space, this is kind of what I said. This is a curve. You can look at this offline, but 30, 40 minutes in a space and then give it 10, 20 minutes break. Simple as that. Makes sense, right? Part 2, transmission scenarios. So business model innovation for all of us. That's a huge part of our 2021 and beyond. Like, what information do we bring to our clients at what time frame? Positive Energy basically did not have a COVID risk assessment deliverable. So we started to develop one, and then my wife, who's our general manager, was like, I don't know if our legal team is going to be okay with this. Turns out the legal team was incredibly not okay with this. So there's a lot of disclaimer language in here. We're taking a risk sharing this, but it's the way it is. You can read this later. This is it. This is the bomb. This is the Wells-Riley law applied to an indoor environment. And there's some caveats on this because the next page is numbers. But look at this curve, right? So look at this. This is a 3-dimensional model. This is 60 data points. So someone say again, yes, you can see a mouse? Okay, great. Thanks, Ashley. So here we are, no mask, 10, 20, 30 people, right? This is occupancy. So same thing here. And that's at an air changes per hour of 9, right? So let me see. Let me introduce this way. Starting over. This is the contour plot of risk in an indoor environment overlaid with 3 environmental factors. Doesn't that sound better? Here's risk on the vertical axis. This axis here is ventilation, right? So you really want to get in this 4 to 6 range of air changes per hour. We can talk about that. There's actually a slide coming up. So this is ventilation. This axis here, these little groups, that is the occupancy. Obviously, occupancy is a big deal. because we are the emitters. And then these are the mask levels. So you can see occupancy, the more occupied, the more risk. You can see, broadly speaking, the air changes per hour, the outdoor air ventilation. Not just outdoor air ventilation, but outdoor air ventilation plus particulate capture in a filter. That's huge. That's really our good news for us. But generally speaking, the risk goes down as the ventilation goes up, right? See, the 9 is much smaller than the 1. And then this dimension here is the masks. This is probably the most important aha moment, right? This was a big aha moment for us. This is why we started sharing this with schools and sharing it with you. Look at no mask, that ramp up, 10, 20, 30. Look at N95. You can't even see it, 10, 20, 30, right? That's an ACH of 9, rarely. Hospitals are 25, schools are probably 1 to 3, your home is probably 0 to 0.5. But now look, go all the way down this N95 row on ACH. Look at that. This whole row, low risk, right? Now, just go over to the cloth mask, not a terrible mask. Now vary the occupancy, and you go from here to here, right? Obviously, as you go from N95 to no mask, it goes up. There are some scenarios, like notice this, N95 to no mask, moving this direction, at a really high ACH, or so really strong ventilation and particle capture, with only 10 people in the room, you stay low risk. 20 people in the room, 30 people in the room. So the ventilation is only okay if the volume of the room is proportional to the ACH, right? So go down here now. So you're still at N95, and now you're at 1 ACH, and now you change the masks. So this one here, this boom, 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 boom. That is just crappy mask or no mask, crappy mask, less crappy mask, good mask, right? Okay. I'm going to assume that's clear. Same thing. Now you're seeing the same thing in numbers. It's kind of, you need to twist it around. The black at the lower right is the peak that was at the upper left before, right? Or upper right. So you see ACH, see occupancy, you see all the masks, and we can start to slice and dice this. I want to be very clear that this was a snapshot in time from early December. All these numbers are going to scale up with the community infectious rate. Like, I'm in this room breathing. What's the likelihood I'm emitting a COVID virion as I breathe, right? Well, that is, if I'm not tested personally, it's based on statistical averages, and we're using Travis County data from 3 different sources, and we do the mean of those. So this is kind of what I went through before. I'll make the PDF available through Kendall and Ashley, and we can get this out. But you can see, like, if you just look at this, just we'll stay on this one now, and I'll probably skip through the rest, and we'll get the questions. But this is the number of new, the data on here, the numbers. They are the number of new cases per occupied room per month, right? So this one has 3 1,000th of at 5 and 10 occupancy with an N95 mask, 3 1,000th of new cases per month, right? That's really small. But big thing is to notice within an ACH of 5, I can go from 3 to 839, right? Within a cloth mask range, I can go from 19, keep in mind, I already left 3 way behind, 19 to 525, right? And I'm using thousandth. Good mask, 2 to 61. Keep in mind, cloth mask, 19 to 525. N95, 2 to 61, right? So no hundreds, no 525. And then within an occupancy, you can see occupancy is a very big deal, right? You go from 26 to 300, roughly 292. And then you guys can read this. So this overview of these 60 runs is really what I wanted to share with you. And Lauren and I basically reached out to Kendall and Ashley saying, early in the year, right now, while it's important, right now, while it's like really important that we get through the next let's say 6 weeks without making bad mistakes. We wanted to make sure that the information flow technology of a Zoom call and our community institutions is working for you. This is the scaling I was referring to. It's essentially a linear scaling with community transmission rate, right? So we are around 3 times higher now. So going back to, let's see, these numbers, all these numbers are 3 times higher now. Important to note that 3 times of a very low risk is still a very low risk, right? 3 times of that 1.4 is a very high number. It means like 3 people out of 10 will get COVID. Yeah, so just I think that my general management here would be really pleased if I told you that this guide, this information I've just shared, this cannot prevent you from getting COVID, right? I can help you reduce this information, if you act on it, can help you reduce risk. But right now, any social activity, any indoors with other people, it's a risk, right? Life is inherently risky. I started to dig into the comparative risk thing. I mean, actuaries, my hat is off to them. That's a rough deal. I think I'm pretty much done. These are model assumptions. This is kind of interesting, and this will be my last slide, and then we'll do Q&A. So this was for a school that had something like 100 classrooms. So I interviewed the mechanical people. We went out, looked at the site, looked at the buildings, looked at all the mechanical systems. And it was very complicated because every building was built different ages with different systems. But if you just look at what they were doing in terms of air changes per hour, there's actually one slide after this, I lied, and then I'm done. Air changes per hour, 0.7, 4, 4.9, 7, 7.8. What we're seeing there is just outdoor air to the outdoor air plus various levels of filtration. So basically you can see outdoor air alone at this school was not getting them in the air changes per hour of 4 to 6 or higher. But as soon as they started to add box fans, right, with filters on them or HEPA filters. Okay, last slide. Oh, how embarrassing. It's off the bottom. But that's ventilation rate across the bottom. And those are probability of infections on those various curves on the vertical axis. Okay, so this is actually a kind of important one. So we are on the blue line. The quanta, which is something kind of complicated for COVID, is around 25 right now. We're not sure. We're learning as a race of beings what it is. So it's around this blue curve. Now, if I'm in home and I have my typical like half-ass, no thought about ventilation, not even a ventilating dehumidifier, just that damper, air damper that's turning not even on, go up to half, I'm around 60% likely to get COVID in that space at an ACH of 50. Now I go over here to this 4 to 6 range, let's pick 6. Now I'm less than 0.1%, right? So this ventilation is something that we as an industry working together really need to recognize as like a big lever. Rich Corsi, when he was at UT Austin, did 2 analyses, one in 2007 and one in 2017 of AISD schools. His language was unequivocating. He said, we are doing a terrible job. He said something like the part of our society responsible for designing and building schools is doing a terrible job, right? Youch, right? So I think that's the end. There's a glossary and that's it. So we went a little long, I apologize, but I'm happy to hang out and do Q&A. And I'm happy if Lauren has anything to chime in or whatever.
Sure.
Kristof, wow, there's a lot of you here. Good job, thank you.
Are we till 1 o'clock? Just to...
I don't have anything until 1:30, but
okay.
Technically, yes, this is 12 to 1. So let's high five Meek. It's not like 12:59.
I want to just thank you, Kristof. I just want to push it out to people who might have something to add to this. I think that in this case, drilling down into such incredibly fascinating, goings on of what we're really, I was fascinated. I was learning so much, and I, like other people, want this presentation to kind of circulate amongst other people that I know and watch it again. It's on the area of like looking at risk and proportion and how to prevent. It's kind of a preventive sort of toned delivery or content. And I think the other scale I just want to throw out there, another kind of aspect of this whole conversation is something I posted an article in the beginning of this chat. I'll post it again at the end. Another kind of window onto this whole world is what's happening in the microbial universe that we align with or can situate ourselves to align with, both in the way that we live and the way that we design. That's a really kind of broad statement there. It's not going to say very much. We don't have much time. But I do think that it's there's lots of area to continue in the sorts of subject matter that we get into the rest of this year, and looking at health having to do with natural systems, and looking at the micro scale in terms of our human biome, the macro scale in terms of the landscape that's right around our buildings, trees, vegetation, critters, biodiversity, and then that kind of medium visible interface scale to us, like the materials that we're actually touching, smelling, feeling the temperature of, all of that. So we can look at immunity and sort of the probiotic side of this, and how we coexist with this world. So I just want to leave it there. And I'll post the link to that article that was on the National AIA newsletter recently. For those of you who are interested, it's a great article, I thought. And leave it up to anybody who has something that they'd like to pipe up. It's always better to hear in voice rather than chat. But if you if we want to just pick up some things on chat, we can do that too.
Yeah, there's some good questions on the chat. So Rich, to your question, yeah, absolutely. Natural ventilation. You know, the interesting thing is that, and I don't like to say this, but rarely is natural ventilation in Austin, Texas going to bring in outdoor air conditions that are considered acceptable for comfort. And furthermore, outdoor air ventilation needs to be filtered. So, and to really prevent COVID with natural ventilation, you'd have to really get high delta P's, pressure differentials, to move air across a filter. So, you know, it would be something like a very tall chimney to really generate those kind of pressures to move air across a filter with natural ventilation. And I would love that not to be the case. But so then Alex, a takeaway for our, that's Rich, Alex. So on the graph, the low rates of risk in the groups of 10, I'm just reading the chat, by the way, reflects less likelihood of an infected person happening to be in the room. Well, yes and no, right? So if there's 10 people in the room and the community infection rate is like 0.35 or 0.035, then it's like 0.35% likely someone in the room, right? You know, usually right now with our infection rates, if there's 10 people in the room, it's around 1% likely that one of them has COVID, right? So if there's 20 people in the room, 2 of them have COVID. If there's 30 people in the room, 3 of them have COVID, right? And that was a big surprise for me, how relatively low infectious rates can lead to relatively high numbers of people in small groups likely to have COVID. And it's also very important to know that this is Travis County data. And talking about Kendall, you know, kind of referring to Kendall's thing about social and especially racial justice or more economic justice issues, right? There are definitely different micro communities in terms of the quality of the home they live in within Travis County, right? So it's icky to say, but it's realistic to say, oh, you're in a very affluent neighborhood. Your community is believing in science and on their game, and they have the luxury to buy $3 masks. So what I'm getting at is the certain zip codes within Travis County that have the more affluence, their community infection rate that I know of is not measured, but it is arguably much lower than poorer areas in Travis County. So all that's getting averaged together. Okay, anyone else see questions that I haven't touched on or we haven't? Please don't get us sued. Thanks, Miguel. Yes, good.
It looks like Laura Brett just wrote, this is so helpful. Could you address whether the UV light is effective? Maybe expand on UVC a little bit.
Yeah, so the whole, hi Laura, by the way, the whole,
hey,
oh, great.
What I'm talking about, Kristof, is that UV light that's on a lot of the filtration systems, the more basic systems that are used. Does that do anything?
It does very little. It's probably more of a psychological effect than an actual net positive impact for preventing COVID. I want to be really clear. There's preventing COVID, and then there's natural, there's just the natural tendency to have good indoor air quality.
Yeah.
But Laura, the most of the UV light-based systems right now, they are producing some ozone or some ionization. And maybe there was just a really good one on IAQ radio where the researchers were saying, I would love to approve these things. And I would also love to say these are great. But generally speaking, what you want to have is you want to have UVC, very narrow band. It's at this 254 nanometer, maybe there's a 220 peak, known to not cause ozone, right? So now there's things like ozone lifetimes are very short. They might not get into your lungs. By the way, you guys, anybody that's flown in an airplane, that sticky, clammy feeling you get after a long transatlantic flight, that's because of ozone chemistry on your skin, right? Ozone's much higher up. It gets into the plane. That's why you feel that way. CO2 on airplanes is why you're sleepy, by the way. So the point is that ozone does chemistry locally. So some people that make these devices that are positive, negative, bipolar ionization, they say, oh, the ion lifetime is so short such that it'll never go out and go into Laura Britt's nose. The ion might never go into your nose, but the chemistry that it caused locally might create out of two benign constituent molecules or particles, something that we're allergic to or react to, right? So this is the tricky part. This is why the words no net benefit are so far consistently applied to all active air purification systems.
Okay.
And caveat, so far, right? Like I personally have the great belief that, the strong belief that there are active purification systems that will work. And maybe some of the ones that are on the market today will eventually be proven, but right now there's no peer-reviewed independent medical research. And the things where they say, oh, this is 99.9% effective, what they mean is at breaking up this molecule. They never talk to you about all the other stuff that's happening with the indoor chemistry, right? So
Yeah, right.
that's the whole point. It can be 99% effective at breaking up one molecule and then 99% effective at creating other bad molecules. We don't know what the balance is. Good.
Okay.
That's a fantastic question. And great
Thank
to
you.
see you.
Thank you, Kristof and Lauren. I'm just going to jump in case people have to jump off. It was a really informative presentation. We'll work with AIA Austin to try and distribute some of this information to those who attended today. And I also just wanted to draw everyone's attention to another event that we actually have coming up on Thursday. It'll be the first of a 4-part event on AIA 2030 commitment.
Yay.
So those of you who have been considering signing up or have had a hard time kind of getting traction in your firms, I really encourage you to register and attend these events. They'll be going through, what the commitment is, how to sign up for it, how to report to it, and doing some kind of mentoring with firms that have been using it and helping everyone get started and get off on a really strong footing with the commitment. So please join us for those events.
Thank you, Kendall. Thank you, Ashley. Someone else have a question?
I'll just throw in there, just following up on Laura's, what we just finished up there with, the idea that it takes care of one thing, kablooey, and then meanwhile, there's all these other things floating around in the air or elsewhere, that it's like, it starts to point to another kind of more zoomed out picture or view of like what else, like the whole mix, the whole soup, and how we can't probably possibly know everything that's going on. It becomes more about strategy and approach and how we kind of think of our systems and design to have approaches that can work for many things at once. So.
Yeah. It would be great if science and math were going to really help out with our society right now. This is a time for deep inner work, and great to be talking about the 2030 challenge. Okay, I guess that's great. Thank you for all the participation, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks for the music, Miguel.
Yeah, Miguel, that was beautiful.